everyone to tonight's budget meeting, and we'll begin with a pledge of allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We make a good effort. I want to say that. All right. We will take a motion to go into an open session of the budget committee. Take a motion. Take a motion. Mr. Cannon, and I'll take a second from the board. Mrs. Grinnell, all in favor, board. All right, we're in budget. I'd like to mention once again that Mr. Vondell and Mrs. Nardolillo are budget co-chairs. And Mr. Kaur, would you like to begin tonight or?
Yes, and I think I will quickly turn it over to Ms. Scriven, who will be putting forth a very important part of our budget this year, and that is our instructional technology portion of our budget. I think this year, more than ever, we realize the integral part of technology in the teaching and learning of our students. So with no further ado, Julie, welcome, and thank you.
Okay. I didn't know, Joe, do you want to talk about the normal first slides, or do you want me to?
I'll be happy to, and then we can get to you.
Okay. Can everybody see my share?
We can. Yep. If you want to go advanced, Julie, it's.
Yep, will do.
Very email to communications@ncolony.org, and you will, be able to put them in that Google Doc, and they will be forwarded to us. Okay. Again, we focus on the mission statement on providing that high quality, relevant education for all our students. And we look at their total development academically and socially. That is integral to what we do. Staff, teachers, and administrators are the individuals who work to provide that high quality education, and we work to develop their collective capacity to do that very important task. So I think this year we can all attest, and if you talk to our staff members, they will talk about incredible growth that they've been asked to make, because it's, this is the world that was thrust upon them literally a year ago, as of March 13th, when we had to pivot. And subsequently, to their credit and to their hard work and to their creativity, to their commitment to our students, they developed their collective capacity to provide the very best they could in a very difficult set of circumstances. And you will talk to people and they will tell you of the struggles and how stressful that experience has been, but they will also tell you about the growth that they've made and how the pride that they feel in making that growth and the pride that they feel in working for our students. So I think, our mission statement is very, very important when we look at our instructional technology, and we look at, the efforts of our staff in IT to make sure that devices are up and running and doing the best we can to make sure that individuals have access to the internet so that they can engage when we are learning remotely. So let's go to the second slide. Our pillars, Ms. Skeels has spoken very clearly and eloquently to these three pillars. I think, technology is woven into academic excellence, equity, and social emotional health. And I think we have done an excellent job of making sure that our students have access to technology and avoiding those opportunity gaps that exist. We still want to know if we have gaps that exist, and we want to, and we will do everything we can to remedy those gaps. Let's go to the next slides. And I will now turn it over to you, Julie.
Okay, so tonight is our IT department budget. It's mostly covering equipment. We're going to cover a little bit of software as well. And at the end, kind of just a refresh of where we are on our Smart Schools Bond Act. Because in normal presentations, there's multiple people speaking and there's lots of chances to kind of break and ask questions. I'll try and break after each kind of like subject and let people ask questions on that as we go, if that's okay. And I guess without any further ado, I'll start. So just a general overview of our department. There's me, the director. I have a network administrator who's here, Keith, if you could say hello. And I have a senior network and systems technician, Tomine, who does networking. I have two network and systems technicians who mostly are on the system side. One of them is also on this call. Brian, if you would say hello, he's back in the wings doing the live stream for us. And I would like to give him a shout out and a thank you because he and Ryan do the live streams for all of our board meetings. And then we have three tech assistants, Ryan Moore, Mike Miniatis, and Brandon Johnson, and then 6 building level computer aides, all of whom deserve a tremendous amount of thanks for just being incredibly flexible, willing to pivot at any moment to deal with the COVID emergency of the day, I guess is what I would say. Little did we know a year ago we would become home Wi-Fi support for 6,000 Spectrum customers. We would hand out probably 2,700 Chromebooks over the summer. Some of them twice, like giving them a Chromebook and then taking it back and giving a new one when they came in for the new school year. So it's been a crazy year. And I guess I would say, I don't think there's ever been a year that better demonstrated the need for technology in schools than this one, that's for sure. So I'm going to give us a little bit of an overview. This slide we tend to use every year because it kind of is a good bellwether, like a gauge of where we're going and where we've kind of come from. And I added a little bit on the bottom about how we've progressed in our Chromebook one-to-one, just for those of you who haven't been in the budget meetings before to kind of gauge. So you'll notice at the top, we started in 2017-18 with our Chromebook one-to-one program in grades 7 to 8. And you'll see as the years progress, the number of Chromebooks obviously is going up. I would say when we hit about 8,400, we're going to plateau out. That's kind of the level that we need in general to really fully be one-to-one K through 12, plus some for staff, plus some for break, fix, and loss, and new students, and a few test centers. When you add all that up together, it's about 8,400 to be fully one-to-one. We limped our way through this summer with what we had. Kind of explain a little more about that later. You'll notice the PC usage is going up. So in that PC total are desktops and laptops. So that's everything from administrator desktops to labs to laptops in teachers' hands, laptops in labs. You'll notice that the MacBook totals are going down significantly because we're replacing most of the MacBooks with PC laptops. By next year, that MacBook total may actually be down to 0 or at least less than 20. So we're very much looking forward to that. You'll also notice that the iMac total is going down significantly, and as of next year, maybe down to 0, maybe at 55, not sure yet. The iPads have kind of stabilized. I'm going to guess that we're not really going to be buying more of those for a while. We did do a replacement cycle, but since we have gone one-to-one, there's less of a need. Most of the iPads right now are used in our special ed department for specialized apps that are only available on the iPads. We also have some carts of iPads in music and art for drawing on them, and music for some of the GarageBand and other apps. They're also used by special ed students in music classes so that they can if they aren't physically able to play an instrument, a lot of times they're able to play an instrument on the iPad instead, and are able to participate like their other classmates. So at the bottom, I want everybody to kind of note how we kind of came across to where we are now with the one-to-one program. So we started in 7th and 8th grade. In 2018, 2019, we really only bought probably 2 or 3 grade levels of Chromebooks, but we actually expanded our one-to-one program because we were able to basically take back some Chromebooks that were in carts in the high school and redistribute them to grades. So that's how we ended up getting all the way 7 to 12. In 2019-20, we bought 1 grade level new plus some spares, and we were able to go 5 to 12, same reason. We were able to pull back some carts. And this past summer, we had a bunch of Chromebooks that, in all honesty, were kind of on their last leg. They're in the 5 to 6-year-old range. They were due to be retired, but technically they were not end of life with Google yet. And we decided to keep them just in case. And that was a really good move because we ended up really needing them to go one-to-one. And that's really that. With ordering our Chromebooks ahead last year, we were able to order some with last year's. And that really was the savior for us because many of the districts in our area were not able to get new Chromebooks. They didn't place their orders before July 1st, and they didn't get anything until January or February. In fact, one of our sister districts in the area just received an order of 500 Chromebooks 2 weeks ago that they had ordered in May. So I count ourselves lucky that we were able to place that order early. And while I would have liked to have had maybe some more better Chromebooks for everybody, we had something for everyone, which was really important. Next one. So that leads me to our Chromebook replacements for next year. So in an ideal world, if you want to be logistically sort of efficient, if you're on a 4-year replacement cycle, which is what we like to plan for with the Chromebooks, you'd ideally like to give them at 1st grade, have them keep it for 4 years, give a new one in 5th grade, keep it for 4 years, give a new one in 9th grade, keep it for 4 years. So you're going to notice grade 1 and grade 9 next year we're replacing. The upcoming 5th graders just got a new Chromebook this year, so I think we're going to let them roll. We'll eventually get everybody on that 159 kind of rolling window. But for next year, we still have not decided who those 2 other grade levels are going to go to. We're trying to kind of wait and see where COVID takes us to see where they best will go. We are probably going to need to pull back about 3,000 Chromebooks this summer to kind of shift and replace ones that are going to be retired. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. The other thing that you'll notice on this slide is that I'm putting 600 for each class level. And if those of you know our enrollment, you'll say, well, there aren't 600 kids in the class. We used to map out how we were going to purchase the Chromebooks. We kind of itemized separately a line item for new students and a line item for replacements and loss and break and damage. And what we found is that in order to keep it equitable, so in order to keep a grade level on the same Chromebook for their whole 4 years. So regardless of whether you're a 6th grade student who just got here or have been here for the last couple of years, you should all be on the same model across that grade level. We found it best to just buy them in batches of 600 and reserve them for that grade level. So next in the replacement cycle are labs and just general PC laptops. So I would like to highlight in red at the top, those are all labs that last year we pushed forward into this year. So they were all labs that were due in our normal replacement cycle to be replaced last year, but for various reasons we were able to push ahead. Last year was a tight budget year, so to start with the CAD desktops, we actually talked, kind of saw how they were performing. The desktops were still performing very well. And so we ended up replacing the monitors, but not the desktops, with full intention of replacing the desktops next year. So you'll see 2 labs in our high school CAD area. You'll also see 2 labs in our art department. Those right now are listed as iMac or equivalent because we are not sure yet whether we will convert those labs to PCs. We're very much wanting to do that. We're working on the software and making sure that we don't hamper our art department by doing so. So I am very hopeful that we will get the cost of those machines down and buy PCs instead. But I wanted to, just in case, to put the value it would, the cost for replacing them as iMacs in. We also have another art cart, 30 MacBooks that is also due to be replaced that we will, I think, wait actually as long as possible to see what COVID is bringing next fall. No one has a crystal ball. We're all hoping that everybody will be back in their classrooms as normal, but we are not sure. And a lot of the software in art and in CAD too, you really have to be on a PC or a Mac to use. It's not something we can load on a Chromebook. So there are some other alternatives we can do to kind of virtually give those desktops to students. And we're kind of waiting to see where COVID takes us before we make our final decisions, I guess. Next, I'll go down. We have a physics laptop cart. This is not the physics labs. It's actually the physics classroom. We have a science research classroom that used to have 15 laptops, but now that everybody has Chromebooks, they really only need 2. They need the 2 because they sometimes need to go to symposiums where they need to present in PowerPoint, which is difficult to do from the Chromebooks. Next, we have J110, which is our computer science lab, is up for renewal. The library would like some general use PCs to check out to students. We had not renewed a cart last year, and we have another one that is up for replacement. So we're doing 5 of their PCs up front. The next 2 categories down there are PC laptops. We've kind of split them because the cost is different for the 2-in-1s and a basic 14-inch laptop. So the 2-in-1s are the ones that flip and you can write on like a tablet. The basic ones are kind of your basic clamshell laptop. So we have 57 and 58 of those to replace. We have 12 MacBooks that we're hoping we might replace with PCs instead of MacBooks, but we're still making the final decision on that. So they're in as MacBooks, hoping to change over to PC. I've added the docking stations to the replacement cycle. We really haven't put them on there before, but I think it's important to note that and account for it so that every year we're trying to keep up with that, because to keep up with the new models, we do end up having to buy new docks. And if you've been to my presentations before, we usually put in about 80 projector replacements a year. This year I dropped it to 63 because we have several buildings under construction over the summer, and the rooms that are under construction will get new technology that is in the construction budget. So I didn't want to double account for those. And again, you'll notice at the bottom, the total, because we'll kind of come to this later, the total of that equipment that we pushed forward from last year is about $156,800. Next, we have a few additions, and you'll notice from a dollar-wise perspective, this is kind of a drop in the bucket in the IT budget. But I did want everybody to see what our teachers were asking for that wasn't on our normal replacement cycle. We have a few TVs in places that didn't have a projector before, so it's officially not a replacement, it's an addition. Some of those are in the music practice rooms, you'll see. We have a color printer in the art department that is new. They're hoping to print smaller, on a high quality, smaller printer so they don't have to use their poster printer for all of their art, their nice project art prints. And then we have 3 iPads for our PE coaches to use while they're out in the field. And I will jump back because I'm realizing I missed. There is a projector at the junior high for overflow of performances or activities in the auditorium that we would potentially like to buy for the cafeteria. So I'll give you kind of the summary here. The 1-to-1 was 619. The replacement cycle together was 410. The department additions were 16,000. that's a little over $1 million. And just to give you kind of a comparison to years past, our budget is a little tough because we tend to buy this in all sorts of different budgets depending upon the year. Sometimes we use Smart Schools, sometimes we might buy some ahead, sometimes we use BOE, so it becomes very confusing, but the number remains relatively the same over every year. So I would say over the last 4 to 5 years, the number that we've needed has been in the $850,000 to $900,000 of instructional tech every year. Last year, our total that was in the budget was $702,769. And if you add back in that 156 that we rolled forward to this year, that's 859,000, almost 860,000 last year. And if you take this total at the bottom of this page and you take that 156 that we rolled from last year out, your total is 889,437. So still in that 850 to 900 range that we kind of always seem to hit in. I guess I would say, regardless of the year and it hits there, some years we have more Chromebooks to replace, some years we have more laptops to replace, some years we have more labs to replace, but that number always seems to drift in that 850 to 900. And as we expand our one-to-one Chromebooks, I feel like that number is, going to trend more towards the 900 because we just have added more to our replacement cycle. So I think I might take a break here because that's a lot. It's a lot that we just went through. And I think the next is actually, software. So I will kind of open it up and see if people have questions on what we talked about so far. And Sandy?
I have a question on the Chromebook one-to-ones. I a few slides back, I might not have followed what you were saying about I get everybody's got a one-to-one now, right? K through 12.
We do.
So grade 1 and grade 9, we're doing replacements. So what are the next two rows for grade level 600?
So I haven't specifically called out which grades we're going to replace with those two. Because we have two different scenarios that we're kind of trying to decide. And I didn't want to specifically call out a grade level on that screen and say, yep, we're replacing grade whatever. And then this fall have them say, wait, I was supposed to get a new one. So definitely we need 2 more grade levels from a volume perspective. What I'm trying to do is get us as quickly as we can to replacing every year grades 1, 5, and 9 to get us there. Because if you'll look back to, let's go back to this slide, when you start by giving out grades 7 and 8, it's difficult to start handing new ones to grades 1, 5, and 9. So I do have a very complicated chart, which I didn't show on here, of the various options of how we get as quickly as possible to that. Some of it is a logistical choice. So it very much depends on whether we're still in COVID mode next fall or not in COVID mode next fall. If we're all in regular school, I think my choice of which grades we're going to replace is going to be different than if we're still in some sort of hybrid mode, just from the logistics of getting them back and shuffling between the grade levels. Because no matter what we do next year, there will be some grade levels that we give a new Chromebook to, collect their current one, have to clean it and roll it down to somebody else. And whether that's in a cart in a classroom, if we're back in the normal school year, we may not be sending kids home in the lower grades with their Chromebook. If you're a kindergartner next fall and we're all in normal school, they may just be sitting in their classrooms waiting for them to use them. They may not be taking them home every night.
So if you're doing a replacement cycle with 1, 5, and 9, and then they use them for 4 years, so, first graders get new ones, they get new ones when they're in 5th grade, et cetera. So wouldn't kindergarten need new ones
you
every
do.
year?
You do, but you're not sending the kindergartners home with them on a general basis. That's not our long-term plan. So you do that in there, but only every 4 years. So it jumps in there, but it's not every year that you're doing kindergarten. So most schools in the area have gone to a plan where they do 1, 5, 9. And then every 4 years they replace the kindergarten ones, or they replace a quarter of the kindergarten. Normally we try and keep them the same. So I would buy a bulk 1 year and then plan to replace them 4. So you would be on most years replacing 3 grade levels, and on 1 year, you're going to have to do 4 to keep up with it. But truthfully,
Okay,
you also
so-
have to keep up with some loaners. If you look at it in the general sense, we have about 8,400 to have a complete rollout of one-to-one, plus our labs, plus the employees that use them. And if you split that by 4, that's 2,100 a year that you're going to have to replace. We haven't been replacing 2,100 a year. So next year we're going to replace 2,400.
Okay, and that'll get us to the 8,400?
So yes, so we have a number of Chromebooks that are going end of life. We have some that we can shuffle and roll down, and I can show you the chart. It's
Oh,
just,
no, that's okay. You cautioned that it was complicated. I just was curious about what the 2 non-specific grade levels were and why we were doing 4 and not 3, and you know.
We're doing 4 because I can show you a little bit of a chart just so I can show you the grade levels. So if you give me 2 seconds.
Oh, now you're scaring me.
Give me 1 second. I'll give you one of the options. This is not necessarily the option we are going with, and in fact, I think it's not, because it shows not the one, but it will give you at least an idea of what kind of goes into this. So it gets very complicated very quickly when you start looking at the colors. And I do not think we are replacing K-1 in those grades. That was one of the options brought forward, but I just present this as an option to show you. What I do want to show you is right now, you see the ones in the light pink over here where my cursor is going? Those 3 models are going end of life. So we know we have to replace those. We also have 4 grade levels covered with this kind of medium blue in here. And what we found is in the past, we could count on a Chromebook lasting between 4, sometimes even 6 years. That particular model is kind of a lemon, and I don't think any of them are making it 4 years. So what we're trying to do next year is reduce the number of grade levels that are using that blue model and actually pull back a grade level and keep those as spares, because we are completely out of spares for that particular model.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, that makes sense.
I will
so four
remove the
years
scary
worth
chart.
It is.
But yes, 4, we definitely need at least 4.
Okay. Thank you.
Does the board have any other questions for Julie on the this hardware? And how about our budget representatives? Well, I don't see any, Julie, so if you want to move on.
We will continue to move on.
Thank you.
All right, so we don't normally talk fully about software, but I do like to kind of give you the highlights of what's kind of new and what's changing.
Mhm.
So let me fast forward to that. So this was a big year for new software for us. COVID, just coping with a lot of labs where we couldn't get the kids into the labs to use software that was specific to the labs. There were a lot of things that are specific to COVID that we're hoping we won't have next year. So I'll kind of go down the list. Pinpoint is our attestation software. Veeam is a backup software. We bought a new backup system that has been working out great for us. In truth, that's actually less than we were paying per year for the licenses of our old one. So it does actually probably, I think our old one was about 6,000. So we're actually about 4,000 to the better, which I probably should have included, but didn't. Zoom, I am hopeful if we're all back, we probably will massively cut down on our number of Zoom licenses. Seesaw, we're planning to keep. We've been using that as a learning management platform for K through 1. Nearpod, we have a pilot, and Padlet as well. Padlet is kind of a collaboration tool with kind of sticky notes on a screen, hard to kind of explain. Nearpod is something that allows you to group a bunch of things together, videos, presentations, different things, add sort of questionnaires or different ways to check on kids' progress. It's a very useful tool. You'll see that later. We've proposed buying that district-wide later on. EduType is actually a great find that our business department is planning to use to replace their current typing program. I do foresee us keeping this, and one good thing about EduType is that it can be run on any device. So we may actually not have to replace, when our business labs come up due for replacement, we may not have to replace all of them. So in the end, although it's costing us some more to get the software, we may end up having a hardware savings in the end. Polyphony Lit is actually an editing class for some of our ELA students. It's for a particular class, and they did want to do it again next year, so asked me to include that in the budget. Overdrive are books, class sets of books. Like, think how you normally for your child, if they were reading the Scarlet Letter, their whole class would come home with that little Scarlet Letter book. Well, in the middle of COVID, not too many people want their kids to use a shared book. So this is a way for us to let kids have access to books online, also reference books. The next two are for our math department. We have been working over the past couple of years to consolidate all of our tools to make it equitable across all grades in all schools. So we have standardized on happy numbers for grades K through 2, worked out very well this year. We also have standardized on reflex math. Right now, it's 3 through 6. You're going to see on my next slide, I've actually separated the 6th grade out, because if we move them to the middle school, we actually have to pay for another building site license. So even though it's really the same number of students, unfortunately, they're going to charge us for building. Sight Reading Factory is one of the programs for the music department, so kids could do what they used to be doing in the Macs in the classroom, but do it on their Chromebooks at home. Soundtrap is a similar package. That's actually a replacement for GarageBand. The next two were science, what used to be sort of curriculum workbooks and things that have now switched to online. CAMI is for our science and math department, mostly at the high school. It allows students to write on a PDF. If you can imagine, if you're in an upper grade science or math class, it gets very difficult to type in formulas. And so that allows them to actually write them in on the PDFs. Vernier Pivot is a way that students can do labs interactively, which we purchased through COVID, and I think we'll probably keep next year. So on to new stuff proposed just for next year. Explore Learning Gizmos allows our science students to see simulations in science. It also has some labs that they can do, and that was a godsend for our science department this year, and they would very much like to keep it for next year. It's something we had in our lower grades, but increased so that the high school students could use it, and it we very much want to renew that. iReady is a math and ELA diagnostics testing program. So it's for testing the reading levels of students. We were previously using a product you'll see below, Star 360. So we will no longer be purchasing Star 360. So we'll be 23,000 to the good. And for that extra 10,000, we will also have math diagnostic testing for our elementary grade levels. The next two are Nearpod and Padlet if we go district-wide instead of just the pilot. The last ones, the ones with the asterisks by them, I have some question marks by, but I would like to budget them in case we need them. We are in the middle of a, as part of EdLaw, a NIST review, and I want to set aside some money in case at the end of this NIST review, we end up needing to do a couple things. One is some cloud backup storage. We had put this in the budget last year, like for this current year, and we haven't had to use it, but I'm thinking next year we might. Also, NERC is also offering Cisco Umbrella service, which my best layman's description of it is, if you're going out to the internet and looking for a web address, it basically checks where you're going before it goes. Sort of similar to the firewall, but slightly different. And CrowdStrike, I'm kind of going out of order here, I'm very sorry. CrowdStrike is an antivirus program. It's just a secondary, another level that we're going to put on some of our servers. Google Workspace for Education Plus. So this is the last big one on this list, actually. So, you know, for many years, people have always touted that, you know, Google is free, and Google G Suite and Google Education Suite has never actually been free for us, in truth. We've always paid a management fee, which is about $25 per Chromebook. That fee actually is going up by $8 next year. We actually bought ahead so that we have the licenses already for our devices, so we won't get hit with that extra charge. Google is now going to charge for some other things. They came out a couple weeks ago and said, hey, we're now going to start charging for some of the services that previously were free. So if we want Meet, if we want some of the auditing tools, we're a little concerned. There's not a lot of data yet to tell us exactly what we're going to need. I'm a little concerned we may need to buy that first level, which is the Education Plus, so I'm putting that in. That's about it for Google. I'm going to stop and ask software if anybody has any software questions before we move on to network. I think 23 seconds is the given amount of time we're supposed to wait for somebody to raise a hand and figure out they're muted. All right, if everybody's okay, I'm gonna move on. I think I can see everybody in my brain.
Mary,
Are you
I don't know if
good?
Mary had a question. She was muted.
Oh, Mary, you're muted.
My question, I was just trying to fill that 23 seconds or 27 seconds, but I will ask, so the 12 MacBooks that you're thinking you'd like to replace with PCs, would that be, again, the only reason you would not replace them with a PC is because of software that's on them?
So yes, honestly, there are some things, if we're not sure that sound trap. So for instance, some of them are in the music department and some of them are in the art department. So there are some advantages to using a PC in the art world. There are some disadvantages to using it in the art world. If you have if you have used a Mac your whole life and, you know, all of your stuff is in iPhoto and, you know, other things on the Mac side, it's difficult to convert to the PC. Truthfully, the basic software that they're using in those classes is the same on both platforms. So all of the Adobe suite is the same, regardless of whether you're on the Mac or the PC. But there are some specialized programs, some of them that are in the animation classes, some of them in the other art classes. So before I say for sure we're gung-ho, going to push them off onto PC, I really want to go with all of their teachers and make sure that we're not ending up, you know, putting someone in a bad situation. So we're still kind of working through that. On the music side, I think there are some questions about whether or not Soundtrap will be an apples to apples replacement for GarageBand. So we're a little on the fence on that. So that's kind of what's putting them up there. There are definitely some advantages other than just the cost for the same, for the same amount of RAM, the same amount of hard drive, the same, you know, CPU. We definitely would get more bang for our buck on the PC side. It will be much cheaper. The other advantage is that we have to buy separate control and security and software update software on the Mac side. We buy a package called Jamf that does that controlling. And that comes with a cost. That comes with the cost in software to keep it active. It also comes with a cost just in keeping our personnel trained in how to use it. So if we can fully get off of MacBooks and iMacs, then that's one part of JAMP that can go, and then we'll only have the iPad portion of JAMP left. So I would really like to go in that direction, but I also realize that there's a lot of built up materials that people have made in those platforms, and we need to be conscious of that.
Right. Thank you. So I guess you can, oh, go ahead, Trish, did you have,
Hi.
how are
Yes,
you?
I'm good, thank you. So I see this is a new and expanded list of software, Julie. I'm curious, is there a list somewhere that's been budgeted for any additional software like that are programs that our teachers use now that will continue for next year? I'm thinking specifically for our primary grades through Learning A to Z, which is Reading A to Z. It gives our students access to leveled readers. Teachers use them as well for instruction.
Yeah,
points,
so
and it's
so
really a lot.
so I'm going to interrupt and say, don't panic about Learning A to Z. It's still in there, still the same grade levels. These are really just things that we are changing. So if it was a software package that we were purchasing already and was across the grades, I believe right now Learning A to Z, Reading A to Z, and Raz Kids, that Raz Plus package is across, oh, I'm gonna have to look this up. I think it's K2 plus some special areas. I don't think we're K3, I think it's K2. Oh, Brian's gonna tell me 3. Okay, we're K3. K3 plus special ed areas. So we've got some reading teachers that also use it, but it's pretty much across the board on those other grade levels. And we did budget for that. But we budgeted for that this year, and that's not changing. And truthfully, we made it a very concerted effort to make sure that we were equitable across the board and put that a couple of years ago, it was spotty who had that and who didn't. And this year and last year, we made a very deliberate effort to make that consistent across all schools and all grade levels. And then News Ella, which I always want to make News ELA. News Ella is really kind of a crossover. It kind of overlaps. That's 3 through 12. So, or 3 through 8? 3 through 12, I think.
Okay, are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Oh, please do, Mary.
Thank you. I guess when I'm looking at your software pricing and the pricing on all of your boards here, your slides, does all that pricing proposed include any discounts available for being a not-for-profit entity?
So most of our software, if we can, we actually will buy through BOCES. There's 2 advantages to that. One is the following year, assuming that we still get expense-based aid next year, the following year, we should actually get about 50% of whatever we spend on that software back as aid. So it behooves us, even if we could get the software somewhere else at a slightly more discounted price, we wouldn't get aid back on it because we wouldn't be able to purchase it through BOCES. So if we purchase it through BOCES on their state contract price that they offer us, we get the aid back the following year. So there have been some situations where, the BOCES price was not particularly competitive and we were kind of, but when you actually did the math and worked it out, it ends up cheaper in the long run to purchase it that way. But we do look for educational discounts everywhere we can. And every time we make a decision about whether or not we're going to buy the software through BOCES, I get a quote on my own, see what the best price we can get is, compare it to the BOCES cost after we get the aid back.
That makes sense. I just had one additional question. So it's indicated that some of these software packages are newer software packages. Does your budget include any training expenses for training staff on new software? Is that part of the technology budget or is that budgeted somewhere else?
That is budgeted somewhere else for, well, there's 2 parts to that question. So there is a small amount of money in my budget that is generally used for my staff. There's also money in my budget for the NARIC Model Schools program, which offers professional development in a ton of the packages that we have. So our teachers can sign up for those classes at no cost because we're a member of Model Schools. So the Model Schools program is about, I'm gonna have to look it up, but I think it was about $12,000 a year. It gives us access to all of that training. And then there is other money set aside outside of my budget also for professional development. I will let somebody else on the instructional side talk about that, but
Thanks, Julie. I would just add in as well that many of these programs are brought in by our department supervisors. So the supervisors themselves then work with either our instructional coaches or the supervisors themselves, and then they provide the internal training, or sometimes work with the companies who will bring in trainers from Start 360, iReady, Newsella, all bring in their trainers, and the supervisors facilitate that work as well.
oh, one more thing, Mary, is that a lot of times when we purchase the software through BOCES, it also comes with professional development. So that's an added service. Part of our service fee that we pay them to buy it through them is to provide us training on it.
Good information. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Julie.
All right, we are moving on to network. Okay, so we have a very shortened list. The list I get from Keith is long and very detailed with some very detailed part numbers, but I try and kind of condense it into categories. So the first one is switches. It's a little higher than it normally is this year. That is because if any of you were listening to the earlier discussion from the maintenance presentation, we are putting more phones and more cameras in our building next year. Those phones and cameras actually get their power from our network switches. They don't plug into an electrical outlet. Their power actually comes across a network wire that has to plug into a switch in our closets. And so we need to provide some more switches so we have enough ports available when those get installed. So you'll notice that number is a little higher than our normal switch replacement cycle. The next one are some battery backup units. This past year, we replaced a really large battery backup unit that powers our entire new data center in the junior high. This year, we're going to replace one that powers most of the items in our main data closet at the high school. There's also a couple smaller ones for some smaller network closets that need to be replaced. Those battery backups, unfortunately, don't last forever. The batteries eventually kind of go dead, and we will replace the batteries in the units, but then eventually the units have to be replaced themselves. We have about $50,000 worth of access points that we're replacing. That's our normal replacement cycle. For those of you who've been watching our presentations, we originally were a Cisco wireless fully everywhere. Now we are transitioning to Aruba. We're kind of going building by building. As of next summer, after we get these, I believe the only building, Keith can correct me if I'm wrong, which is entirely possible, but I believe the only building left on Cisco will be the high school after this. So as they age out, we are replacing and kind of shuffling to make everybody on Aruba. We have 3 places where we're replacing the fiber between network closets. One is a location in Southgate. We have a location at Blue Creek. We have a location at Central Office. We also have some Cat6 cabling that is going to be installed to support those cameras and phones that are going in. It's about $60,000 worth. It's across multiple buildings. We always put in some for our replacement cycle for servers. So there's about 18,000 there. And sometime next year, I'm not sure whether it will be this summer or the following spring, but still in the same budget cycle, we will need to replace our firewall, or at least 1/2 of what may become our firewall. And the estimate for that, we still are actually waiting for our bids to come in through E-rate, but the estimate right now is $75,000. That number may change once we get our bids in, but they're not here yet. On all of that, if you look at our estimated E-rate will be about 152,000. That's about half of our network expenses. The servers don't qualify for E-rate, so we'll buy those through BOCES, and you'll see the BOCES aid below is estimated to be about $9,000 on those. I'm actually just going to stop and ask questions about network stuff, and then I'll go on to the two super easy codes because they haven't changed in the, I think, last 5 years I presented. So anybody have any questions on nitty-gritty network hardware? I'll ask somebody else to count for the silence.
I am not seeing any questions.
Okay. All right, the last two codes are fairly easy equipment codes to talk about. One is our non-public hardware code. That technically is hardware that we loan to non-public schools. We're probably never ever going to get it back, but I suppose if the school went belly up, it would come back to us. So when we order that equipment for them, we actually inventory it and tag it, but it goes to them and we generally don't ever see it again. That amount is calculated by the state based on enrollment from the previous year. So next year, it is proposed to be $13,500.
Is
The
that
last equipment,
our enrollment or the enrollment of the non-public schools?
I believe that's both are included in it.
Thank you.
Okay, the last code we've got is IT equipment. That has been the same amount for, I think, it has not changed since I have been in this position. So that is technically equipment that is not aidable. It is usually stuff for, it's usually non-instructional staff or building items, but that doesn't mean it has to be. So we have occasionally had to use this for instructional equipment. It's kind of the universal donor of codes. You could transfer it to be used somewhere else, but you can't move anything into here. So it's generally used for laptops, desktops, copiers, screens, TVs. Since I am technically a non-instructional person, if I needed to replace my laptop, this is the code it would come out of. And it has been the same number for ever. All right, so last is Smart Schools Bond Act. So I don't have a lot to say about Smart Schools Bond Act. We don't have any plans at the moment to use it. That doesn't mean we couldn't use it for something. We have about $541,000 left of money to use. In the past year, we actually, for those of you who remember, we had one category that when we first placed our first Smart Schools Bond Act application in was not considered shareable with our non-public schools. And a couple months after we were approved, they went back and said, oh, you know what, now that code is shareable. They actually gave us some extra money to give to our non-publics on top of what they had already given us. And some of the non-publics took advantage of that this year, but that is outside of this total here. That was specifically designated for them. So we have about 541,000 left that we could spend. There are some categories that are not shareable that we could spend it in, but I do want to caution everybody, in the best of times, it takes about 9 months to get a Smart Schools Bond Act approval. Right now, in COVID times, it has been worse than that. And the schools last year that went for the expedited approval, which was supposed to be super, super fast for just Chromebooks, most of them did not get approved until January or February of this year. So while it's very tempting to put our Chromebooks in there for next year, if we did so, I don't think we would see them until next spring. I think that is pretty much all I've got. I'll open it back up for more questions. And
Okay, Board of Education and budget representatives. This is the time to ask your questions if you have any for Julie.
I just think Julie does a great job. A great job anticipating our needs and doing her best for the faculty and our students, and even us when we have a problem with technology, Zoom technology. And Julia, I know you've been very patient with me on occasion. So we really appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you.
Your whole department is outstanding.
Okay, and as always, we have our for our streaming viewers, we have our questions. Do we have any, Joe, from our last meeting?
We do not. Julia, do we have any questions from our live stream audience?
No, we don't, Mr. Core.
Thank you very much. I'd like to note that we peaked at 22 individuals tonight on the live stream. And we can see that we are not on next Monday night, but we are on the 24th. And then following up on the 29th. Those are two important nights where we talk about staffing, enrollment, and new programs and initiatives. Extremely important nights, and we want to dedicate the time appropriately to such. Any other questions from the board or from our audience?
No, I have no question, but I would like to apologize for our short delay in getting the meeting started. And we're going to be very aware of that next time. So that will not happen again.
I had a question, and maybe this isn't the forum for it, but with COVID and how it's affected commercial real estate, is there any concerns about the tax basis for North Colony, or that still looks pretty stable?
It's a great question. It's a very good question. Mr. Hoot, would you like to comment on that? We are anticipating, factored in this year, a tax base growth of 1.59%. But I think that's a valid concern going forward. Mr. Hoot, do you want to add anything there?
Sure, Mr. Cord. What I can add is that the volume of property tax challenges that came through the tax surgery articles this year are about 50% higher than normal. So there is some concern just based on that particular volume that we've seen. And, as we move through the budget cycle, we will certainly be getting feedback from the tax department for the town of Colony, and to really hopefully get a gauge on what ultimately they will be projecting for the ultimate increase in the overall property values that we can then factor into providing that information to the taxpayers as we get closer to adopting or having the board consider adopting a final budget. But again, just the volume alone is somewhat concerning. It may not be indicative of what we will see going forward, but it's one indication of the result of values as effect that COVID has affected the commercial properties. Good question.
Absolutely. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Again, if you have questions, you can always email them to communications@ncolony.org. Mrs. Nardolillo, and Mr. Vondell. I think that concludes our end for this evening.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Nardolillo and Mr. Vondell. I want to thank Julie for an excellent presentation and her entire department for all the good work they do. I'd like to thank Mr. Core as usual, our central office team, all of our community budget representatives, and all 22 people who joined us tonight. We appreciate the fact that you wanted to spend the evening with us. So I'll take a motion to adjourn. I can't see everybody though. Mrs. Nardolillo, I'll take a second. Take a second.
I'll second Sandy.
Okay, Mrs. Tyneburn seconds it, and that includes a motion to adjourn as well. All in favor? All right, thank you very much. All right.
Have a great evening.
Yep, thanks again.